In Earth's distant past, the Carboniferous period transformed ordinary life into gigantic forms. Insects grew to monstrous sizes, and scorpions reached lengths rivaling small dogs. Dense forests stretched under hot, humid skies, while oxygen levels soared higher than any modern standard. Unnatural creatures roamed every corner of the land, in dark waters and across the swampy forest floor. Join us as we step into a world where nature's extremes shaped a truly nightmarish ancient world. The Carboniferous took place between about 359 and 299 million years ago, falling within the late Paleozoic era. Our planet looked very different then. Much of the land was grouped into large continental blocks. Gondwana covered the south, while Laurussia lay farther north. These giant land masses edged toward forming Pangaea, a supercontinent that would dominate later times. Vast areas rested along warm, tropical zones that shifted according to rising or falling sea levels. During this period, the climate swung between warm, humid stretches and cooler spells. Glaciers advanced and retreated over the southern poles. In tropical areas, steam-filled swamps spread over lowlands, creating some of the densest forests Earth has ever seen. Vegetation thrived in these equatorial wetlands, leaving behind immense coal deposits. That's where the Carboniferous gets its name, carbon-bearing. These forests, packed with giant club mosses and towering ferns, formed the basis of huge peat swamps. Over millions of years, the buried plant matter turned to coal under heat and pressure. Oxygen levels rose to remarkable heights, hitting about 30 to 35%, compared to our modern 21%. Higher oxygen made it easier for arthropods and insects to develop larger bodies. Millipedes spanning lengths of cars and dragonflies with wingspans like hawks owe their monstrous forms to this unique atmosphere. The watery parts of the planet were also anything but safe. Seas flooded shallow interiors, leaving behind broad marine basins that came and went with each glacial cycle. Life adapted to brackish coastal lagoons, swampy estuaries, and deeper open waters. Many creatures we think of as modern had distant ancestors lurking here, including early sharks, bony fish, and the first reptiles. The Carboniferous stands out for its thick coals, tall forests, giant insects, and bizarre aquatic life. It was a world always on edge. Each shift in climate or ocean level could reshape entire habitats. Animals and plants had to grow and adapt fast, or risk extinction. With so many specialized and oversized life forms, it was a high-stakes arena where only the toughest survived. That tense backdrop set the stage for terrifying creatures on land and sea, each fighting for a place in an unforgiving environment. Carboniferous swamps were not for the faint of heart. The soggy ground and thick vegetation hid arthropods that dwarfed today's insects and spiders. One of the most iconic was Arthropleura, a millipede-like creature that could stretch over 2 meters long. It was as wide as a person's torso, with countless jointed segments and legs working in a synchronized crawl. Though mostly feeding on dead plant material, it still gave a mysterious presence. Imagine a massive armor-plated millipede rustling through leaf litter, each step rattling the forest floor. A single brush of those powerful jaws was enough to sever tough stems or bark. Equally unsettling was Pulmonoscorpius, a giant scorpion reaching lengths of up to 70 centimeters. Its pincers could grip firmly, and its stinger likely packed venom strong enough to kill or paralyze its victims. These prehistoric scorpions hid under logs or dense undergrowth, ready to ambush passing prey. With high oxygen fueling their growth, they had no trouble getting big and staying powerful. You might assume these arthropods were slow, but that high oxygen level also boosted metabolism. They could scuttle at surprising speed. A scorpion the length of your forearm scurrying across your path, its tail arched high, made this swamp a place you'd never want to visit at night. Other large arthropods lurked nearby, thick-shelled cockroach-like forms and massive water bugs in the muddy shallows, each specialized to feed on whatever they could find. The carbon-rich soils and steady humidity allowed these creatures to hide among rotting logs, thick moss, and tangled roots. Every corner of the swamp seemed to move with segmented bodies or thick exoskeletons. Strange rustling sounds echoed as they searched for food, whether that meant decaying plant matter or the flesh of smaller animals. These beasts did more than startle or scare. They shaped their environment by breaking down vegetation and at times controlling populations of lesser creatures. Their presence made every step in the Carboniferous world uncertain. Even a quick walk might lead you to face a Pulmonoscorpius on guard, pincers raised, stinger poised. If you disliked spiders or insects before, these ancient giants took fear to a whole new level. Stepping through the humid Carboniferous air, you might hear a loud buzzing overhead. That roar could belong to Meganeura, a giant insect shaped like a dragonfly but far bigger. It soared with a wingspan of up to 70 centimeters. Its massive compound eyes gave it perfect vision, letting it catch smaller insects, amphibians, or even baby reptiles on the wing. One powerful snap from its mandibles would end any chase. This was no gentle flyer. It was a swift aerial predator, unmatched in those heavy, oxygen-rich skies. High oxygen not only fed large bodies but also allowed vigorous flight. Imagine a swarm of these huge dragonflies, circling above a swamp, scanning for prey. They swooped down in swift dives, their wings creating a humming that echoed through the muggy undergrowth. They were deadly silent in approach until that final rush of wings spelled doom for unsuspecting animals. Other ancient insects also took advantage of the carbon-laden atmosphere. Some species of giant mayflies, up to 30 centimeters long, filled the air during breeding swarms. Their brief adult lives ended in mass die-offs, leaving thick carpets of twitching bodies that fed arthropods, amphibians, and fish. Smaller creatures, used to feeding on typical insects, found a feast in these big ones, but risked becoming prey to the formidable predators that patrolled overhead. The variety among these insects was astounding. Some walked on the forest floor, eating decaying material. Others specialized in feeding off massive spore-laden ferns. Many developed bright patterns to help them blend in among the spore clusters or bark. In the dense canopy, their calls, chirps, clicks, and droning hums overlapped in a strange chorus. The shade of giant lycopsids or scaly-barked trees offered them safety from aerial hunters like Meganeura. Yet no place was truly safe if a predator could slip through the leaves. These monstrous insects reigned in a world with few flying vertebrates. Their competition mostly came from each other. Nature had not yet developed the swift pterosaurs or cunning birds we know from later periods. So if you looked up, the sky belonged to these six-legged beasts. Their size alone could spark panic, and their hunger shaped the balance of life in the Carboniferous forest. Venturing into the swampy waters did not bring relief. Here swam creatures as dreadful as anything on land. One prime example was Orthocanthus, a long-bodied eel-like predator often considered a freshwater shark. At up to 3 or 4 meters, it could outsize a person. Lurking in marshy rivers, Orthocanthus had a bizarre, tapered head crowned with a spine. Inside its mouth, rows of teeth formed a spiral pattern that kept regenerating, like a conveyor belt of deadly blades. Fossil evidence shows these predators sometimes turned to cannibalism. Scientists have discovered juvenile remains in their droppings, hinting that scarcity made them devour their kind. That weird behavior underscores the fierce competition in these waters. Orthocanthus used its pointed fins and muscular tail to chase smaller fish, amphibians, or perhaps the young of its fellow sharks. A single bite from its jaws could slice up prey within seconds. Other water dwellers carried their brand of terror. Some were early bony fish with sharp jaws for crunching shells or tough hide. Others were elasmobranchs, primitive sharks with unusual shapes. The interplay of high oxygen and shifting environments gave them ample room to grow large and powerful. Rivers and shallow basins teemed with these fish, each adapted to a specialized niche. Plants and logs decayed in the water, releasing thick, organic-rich clouds. Visibility was poor, letting predators approach unseen. In the deeper spots, large amphibians lurked, searching for smaller prey. Each trip to the water's edge became a gamble. An Orthocanthus might be waiting, hidden by floating debris or tangled ferns. For small animals drawn to the water to drink or feed, a stealthy predator could erupt from beneath the surface. Even the shallower streams were tricky. Freshwater scorpions or aquatic arthropods sometimes hid in the murk. In a single breath, a carefree amphibian searching for insects could be caught by a hidden mouthful of teeth. The water's surface offered no safety either. Some giant fish might leap up and snatch smaller creatures that came too close. Life in these waterways was a constant battle, with tooth and jaw reaping a steady toll in the gloom. The Carboniferous waters were as grim as the land, if not more so. On land, the forests grew tall and dense, soaking in the intense humidity and high oxygen. The canopy was formed by giant club mosses, tree-like ferns, and other plants that towered up to 30 meters or more. Their thick trunks bristled with patterns, like the scaly bark of lepidodendron or the ribbed texture of sigillaria. Yet these forests were not peaceful. Strange amphibian-like tetrapods and other odd beasts hid among the roots and logs, ready to lunge. Some of these tetrapods were quite large. Labyrinthodont amphibians, with wide heads and maze-like tooth structures, preyed on smaller animals. They lurked in shallow water or damp soil, using short bursts of motion to catch unsuspecting insects or fish. Their thick skins and sturdy bones set them apart from modern amphibians, showing they could handle a more rugged world. The floors were an uneven tangle of roots and fallen branches, littered with decaying trunks. Carbon-rich peat formed in these areas, which over time would become the coal we dig up today. Pockets of gas built up in rotting logs, sometimes creating bubble traps that could drown smaller animals. Giants and dwarfs alike had to watch where they stepped, or they risked sinking into sticky mud or flammable swamp gas. Some species of arthropods specialize in these dim forest floors. Huge spider-like creatures scuttled through leaf litter, although many turned out to be sea scorpion relatives once scientists studied them. Others were real scorpions that adapted to the land, with lungs that allowed them to breathe outside water. Many of them glowed faintly under certain lights, highlighting the thick exoskeleton that protected them. Big ferns dominated parts of the lower canopy, branching out in lush fronds. They shed thick carpets of leaves, making perfect hiding places for stinging arthropods or venomous amphibians. In the quiet of the forest floor, one might hear the slow rustle of a giant snail or a scorpion's tail tapping a trunk. These coal forests were so productive that they shaped the climate. The vast plant life pulled carbon dioxide from the air and locked it into swampy peat. At the same time, the animals that roamed below benefited from a moist environment where food was often plentiful. Yet danger lurked behind every trunk, and a single misstep could turn a foraging trip into a fight for life. If anyone thought going offshore would be safer, the Carboniferous seas proved them wrong. Some of the biggest threats came from sea scorpions, or eurypterids, that could measure over 2 meters in length. They were among the largest arthropods to ever exist. Their segmented bodies, spined limbs, and swimming paddles formed a lethal package. They scuttled across muddy seafloors, lurking near reefs or in shallow bays, poised to snare anything passing by. One branch of these creatures, the genus Herbivores, reached around 1.6 meters in length, making it a behemoth among scorpions. With wide bodies and spined pincers, they grabbed fish and smaller arthropods. Even amphibians swimming near the brackish water mouths could fall victim to a sudden slicing pinch. The strong pincers would drag prey in, and the scorpion's pointed tail fins helped it maneuver. Not all sea scorpions were monstrous in size. Some specialized in certain habitats, whether open coastal waters or swampy lagoons. But as a group, they posed a continuous danger to anything that ventured into their domain. Some were stealth hunters, burying themselves in sediment with only their eyes or tails visible. Others actively prowled the sea floor. Their exact lifestyles vary by species, but all share a reputation for aggression and efficiency. Fossil trackways record how these eurypterids left marks on beaches or shallow flats when water levels dropped. A strolling sea scorpion, half submerged in mud, must have been a strange sight. Yet that amphibious ability lets them search for prey in multiple ecosystems. Some might chase after fish in one tide pool, then scuttle overland to another. The presence of eurypterids highlights how arthropods reached astonishing sizes in the Carboniferous. High oxygen and minimal competition from advanced vertebrate predators gave them freedom to grow. They developed thick exoskeletons, fearsome pincers, and a knack for cornering their meals. For any ancient fish or land creature foolish enough to wade in shallow waters, these sea scorpions were a nightmare incarnate. Behind these nightmarish creatures lay powerful geological and climate forces. The Carboniferous marked a time of shifting continents and dramatic changes in sea level. Laurussia, where modern North America, Europe, and parts of Asia were joined, and Gondwana, covering large parts of the southern hemisphere, edged closer, leading to the early formation of Pangaea. This collision raised mountains, changed weather patterns, and paved the way for repeated episodes of glaciation. Coal deposits tell the story of steamy, swampy lowlands. Trees and giant club mosses stood in thick stands. When these drowned under rising seas, new sediment buried them. Over millions of years, these layers compressed into coal. Each rise and fall of sea level, known as a cyclothem, built fresh layers of sediment and peat. That cycle repeated countless times, driving the carbon-rich deposits that define the name Carboniferous. Climate swings were common. Oxygen soared to levels near 30 to 35%, fueling big insect growth. Meanwhile, glaciers spread across southern Gondwana. During cold spells, water froze, shrinking global sea levels. Swamps retreated and rainforest belts narrowed. In warmer phases, ice melted, seas advanced, and the wetlands returned. This seesaw shaped the distribution of habitats, forcing animals to adapt or vanish. Geologically, the lines of collision created large mountain belts in some regions. The formation of the Appalachian chain in eastern North America, for instance, began during late Paleozoic collisions. Thick layers of sediment washed from these mountains into nearby basins. The swamps that formed in such basins hosted giant amphibians and arthropods. Meanwhile, epicontinental seas spread over shallow continental interiors, offering niches for fish, sharks, and marine scorpions. The interplay of land and ocean made countless microenvironments. CO2 levels also shifted. The thick forests kept carbon locked in peat, gradually dropping atmospheric CO2. Glacial episodes spiked each time CO2 fell enough to encourage polar ice expansion. The oxygen-carbon dance shaped life in every corner. This constant flux created harsh conditions. Some species thrived on the lush, humid swamps, while others survived the cooler, drier intervals. No matter where you turned in the Carboniferous, threats lurked. The forests, thick and dim, were home to monstrous arthropods that scuttled under rotting logs. Giant amphibians patrolled watery hollows. Some amphibians reached sizes near small crocodiles, able to lunge at passing prey. On forest floors, you could stumble across a Pulmonoscorpius, or get a glimpse of Arthropleura's massive segments gliding through the undergrowth. Above, insects like Meganeurus soared. Their wings thumped the moist air. A single swoop could be enough to seize smaller creatures. In deeper swamps or open water, Orthocanthus cut a sinister figure, jaws bristling with whorled teeth. Even stepping into a shallow lagoon might lead you to face with a lurking sea scorpion. The environment itself posed dangers too. High humidity invited rot and decay, with pockets of flammable peat that might catch fire or release toxic gas. The climate made everything more unstable. At times, giant floods swamped lowlands, flushing predators into new territory. At other times, drying cycles forced animals to cluster around shrinking waterways, intensifying conflict. The unstoppable growth of plants created thick canopies that limited visibility on land. Oxygen-rich air helped large creatures thrive, and ironically fueled bigger wildfires as well. The swirl of conditions favored swift evolution, producing ever more adapted and sometimes terrifying life forms. Competition was fierce, as these powerful creatures fought for limited resources. Arthropods battled over decaying logs. Amphibians and early reptile-like amniotes squabbled for prime hunting spots. Sea scorpions wrestled fish in coastal waters. Errors in judgment or a single misstep often spelled doom. The Carboniferous was less about gentle coexistence and more about survival in a place that favored brute force and cunning. To call it a nightmare might be an understatement. Many of these creatures appear so strange and large that they almost seem fictional. Yet the fossils confirm that reality can outdo our wildest imagination. Under the endless drone of giant insects and the rustle of monstrous scorpions, life in the Carboniferous was a mix of dark wonder and raw danger. No corner of this ancient land was safe. It was a domain of unstoppable growth and epic battles, a living horror show that shaped the path of evolution. The Carboniferous period stands as a powerful example of nature's boundless creativity. From towering swamp forests and giant arthropods to monstrous amphibians and strange fish, it was an era shaped by extreme oxygen levels, wild climate swings, and fierce competition. Would you brave these scorpion-infested forests or shark-filled swamps? Share your thoughts below. If you found this journey into ancient nightmares fascinating, then don't forget to catch our next one, shown on screen.